into it a little bit more today. I just like to ask questions to know what kind of background we have on this specific topic. So this is a very fun topic for me. I spend a good chunk of time working before I did my doctorate, I worked for the Boeing company and I did process improvement for them. The Boeing company is the company that makes airplanes. I was in the wing division at the time, and I learned a lot. I was young, I didn't know much about process improvement, but it seemed very exciting for me. And Boeing being such a monster of a company, at the time when I was there, they had like 180,000 employees or something like that, or 170,000 employees. So they had their own university and their own method of how you do stuff. So when I went in, not only I was learning live in the factory floor with the team that I was assigned to, but I was also having to take those classes at the Boeing University and learning. So I learned all kinds of cool stuff, and then we applied it. And the biggest project I worked on was putting a 747 wing. I don't know if you've seen the 747. It's the really big plane with like a quarter on top. So it's like a big plane, and then there's like a quarter on top, so it's a floor and a quarter. The wing is monstrous. It's a very, very big wing. From far away, we can't tell, but when you're there, as you get close to the body where the wing meets the body, I used to be able to stand inside the wing, like standing up straight. And I am 183. So so I'm not, I'm not super tall, but I'm 183, right? So I'm that's 6 feet. So that's, pretty decent. And I used to be able to stand up so in it straight. So that tells you how big this thing is. So in the end, we ended up putting this wing. So the crane used to come and take it from one area to another. So it will take it from, let's say, sealing to testing to electrical to plumbing, and then to the painting booths. And the crane every time will have to come pick up this wing and move it to another area. And at the time, they hired this very expensive consultant from Japan, Toyota. And he came in and he basically advised us on that the best way is to put the 747 wing on a moving line. So then that way it moves through all of those areas at a certain, at a really low speed. So workers don't feel that it's moving, but eventually it moves through, and thus enhancing and improving the process that we had. Which removed a lot of crane work. So now the crane only has to come in the beginning and then in the end of the process, not a million times in the middle. And a lot of the problems used to be is that the crane operator will call up the people and be like, hey, are you ready? And they'll be like, no, we're not. And then they will delay another 100 planes behind them. The other thing that Boeing was trying to do is produce more 747s at the time because they were getting more contracts. So before we did this move, the plane used to be, Boeing used to produce every 9 days one of those big 747 planes. And the goal was to shift production to make it every 4 days. So every 4 days to get one of those 747 planes out. So that's another reason why we had to tighten things up. And we moved from 2 shifts to 3 shifts. So I had, as a young person on the team, one of my big jobs was to reschedule all those jobs. And as you can imagine, that was a nightmare. There was hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of jobs, and trying to reschedule all that and making sure that everything connects well and everything goes well was a big, big challenge. But I learned a lot and it was a lot of fun. But that's the beginning of my interest and my learning into process improvement. So once this is all over, please feel free anytime to give me a call, and I'll be more than happy to share with you more resources or talk more about this stuff. So here's a few things that we want to that I hope that we can touch on today. There is one powerful tool for process improvement that we're going to dig into today, which is plan, do, check, and act cycle. We're going to be working on that most of the day today. I want to spend a little bit of time talking about and discussing with you the importance of why process improvement mindset is very important to help us unlock basically an organization's potential. I want to spend a little bit of time talking about how do we apply those tools, and especially this tool, the PDCA tool, to help us enhance efficiency and productivity within our own organization and our own units. And then in the end, we want to make sure that we touch on ways to nurture a culture of continuous improvement in our teams. Any questions so far? Okay, so I want to share with you also one game that was developed by a gentleman. His name is Boris Glogner. He's German. I'm not sure if I said his last name right. But this is a game that you can use later on with your teams. I selected, there are many games that you can use, and I'll be more than happy to point you in the right direction if you like. But this game was developed recently. And it was developed especially for doing stuff on Zoom. And this requires us to, for example, not necessarily today, we're not going to play the game today, but I want to show you how it's done. So for example, let's say I have on my camera, I have Betty, Beatrice. That's kind of the order that I have. So I have Betty, Beatrice, and then I'm not sure who this is, Modular. Then there's Sebastian, then there's Essie, then there's Harry. So for example, those 5-6 people that I mentioned their name, I'm going to ask them in a bit to open their camera to just do a mini exercise so everybody can see how this game works. But usually what you do in your teams is you can tell your team to do this over 4 or 5 rounds. Usually the rounds are really short. They're like about 1 minute long. And the idea is, let me tell you a little bit about the rules also. So basically anyone usually is allowed to participate if you're attending the meeting. And if someone doesn't want to play for a reason or another, we usually assign that person as a timekeeper, and a person to assign to take pictures of screenshots. Because the way this is going to work is, the way we're going to play this game is the team has to write words. And we have to use the number of letters corresponding to the number of participants. So every participant gets to do 1 letter, and then we need to build words. And every time we build a word, we need to take a picture, and then that team gets 1 point. Does that make sense? So for example, can we some of us, the people that I mentioned their names, can you open your cameras so we can test this out a little bit?
And you may need to stop sharing so folks can actually see each other.
Oh, yeah. I forgot about that. Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you, Amy. Okay, so we have a few, I don't know if Betty and Sebastian, for example, and Essie can also help us out maybe. There's 1 camera that is black, so that one is not working. You can turn it off, it's not a problem. So basically what you want to do is you want to use hand signals, right, to basically make a letter, okay? And all of you have to try to basically come up with a word in the order that we see it on the screen. That's how that game works. So, so for example, we can start by, you can pick a word. We have 5 cameras. Actually, we have 6. We have Amy in, so Amy can join. We have 7, Sebastian. So you can think of a word, for example, that has 7 letters, and then you have to signal them using hand gestures, just like you saw. So for example, if you want to do a B, you can, try to do something like this, or something like that, right? And the idea is that you only get 60 seconds to make as many words as you can. Okay, does that make sense? But for you, we're just going to do 1 or 2, so you just see how it works, so then later you can use it with your teams. But the idea of this is, in the beginning, you're going to be really, really slow. And then the more you give people time to work together and understand each other, with time, you do this over 10-15 minutes, and people are always blown away because the speed suddenly gets better and better and better. Like in the beginning, in 1 minute, you might do 1 word, but then by the last time you do it, you'll be doing 5 words or something. And then it's usually a nice exercise to let teams realize, wow, that's the power of process improvement. Even in this little exercise, if you do a process over and over with a team and you think it through, it just gets better. So let's try to demonstrate to everyone, if you don't mind. Amy, are you going to participate with the team? All right. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So we have 7 cameras on. All right. So I'm going to time you. I'm going to give you 60 seconds. And you're going to try to make as many words as you can. Obviously, it has to be 7, maximum 7 letters, because there's 7 of you. Sounds good? Are you ready to go?
I need a little clarity. So what is it? So we each make a word, or we each make a letter, and then it works out to 1 word with 7 letters.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And you can converse with each other, but then you actually have to demonstrate, using your hands. You have to demonstrate the word. And then once the word is obvious, we take a picture, a screenshot, and then that's 1 point. And then within 1 minute, we want to see how many points we can make.
And so am I the first person that is showing up on the screen?
So yes, so Amy is the first person, right? And then it's Harry, then Beatrice, then Barbara, then Betty, then Essie, then Sebastian. Do you all see the same order?
No.
No,
I read a lot about this last week, and they said that you should, only me and Amy should be.
One thing that you can do too is if you go to click view, you can do follow hosts view video order, and that might help.
Where is that?
If you click view.
Okay.
Which is the top right-hand corner.
Yeah, top right-hand corner, and
of the screen.
Follow host video order.
You see, that was not written anywhere in the thing.
I don't see that option.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I don't have that option either.
Maybe
I said you hide on full screen. Do you, Charlie, you have that option?
Okay, I think everyone should have the same order now.
Okay.
So
now it's Amy, then Harry, then Beatrice, then Barbara, then Betty, then Essie, then Sebastian.
everyone see that?
still no.
I see Amy, Charlie, Faris, Harry, Beatrice, Barbara, Betty, Essie, and Sebastian.
Perfect.
That's what I also see.
Perfect.
Okay.
Yeah, that's
Okay.
fine, because me and Charlie are not gonna play with you, but yes. So
Okay.
that's perfect order. All right, so you ready? I'm gonna give you a minute.
We can spell the word Charlie. It's 7 letters and it's right there.
1, 2, go.
The name. Okay. Harry?
So
Your
is that a
H.
C?
Give us a
Do I-
H.
I'm the C.
It's a C. So do I have to come up with this? No, I'm
H.
confused now.
You need to
You're
come
the
up with H. H.
Oh, okay.
And then
I think it is an H.
R.
the Barbara, you're the R. Barbara, can you hear? So Barbara, you need to do an R.
Yes, I can hear you.
Yes, so you need to make the R because we're making Charlie.
R.
Yes.
I'm making an L.
No.
R.
We're almost there.
I am making an I. Can you see me?
I'm making an R.
All right, so Sebastian, we need an E from you.
All right, here's picture time. Okay, so that was good job. So that was 2 minutes, but that was good. So now we're learning how to do it, right? So do you want to do one more word?
Sure. How about
Matthew.
Matthew?
All right, we're gonna do Matthew. I'm gonna
All right, I'm
start.
doing the M.
I'll do the E.
Beatrice and Barbara, you're
Beatrice?
both T's.
I'll do an A.
I'm doing
No.
it.
So Harry's got the A.
Okay.
Betty. Beatrice and Barbara is T.
T. Okay. Oh,
I'm trying an E.
I'm doing
I'm doing
I'm doing
a
H.
T.
Carol
I'm
made
doing
it.
a T.
H.
Excellent. Right?
We got it.
Wow, that was 34 seconds. All right, so thank you for, entertaining, willing to participate. I really appreciate it. But there's a lot of little exercises like this, and this is one of them that you can easily do with a team. So this one was developed for Zoom. So that way you can just demonstrate even online that, even with time, we can improve. So hopefully that was helpful. You can use it later. Like I said, I can send you a link to a website that has a bunch of those games. So just let me know, and then you can try different ones with your teams. So hopefully that was fun. Any questions before we move on? And the way you play this game is that you just give people 4 or 5 rounds, and that's enough. And each one of them is 60 seconds. And then you just, they go through this process just like that. Sounds good? All right. So back to our PowerPoint. So then, all right. So why does process improvement matter? And here I have for you the 5 most important things that people talk about all the time. And one of them is obviously efficiency and productivity, which is very obvious. But think about it this way. If you have a process that has, let's say, 7 steps, if there is a way where we can make it 5 steps, we've already helped our team save those 2 steps every single time we do this exercise. So one of the things I had to do for Boeing when I was really young, I used to have to carry this monstrous device and track people's movements in the factory, and then try to find ways to improve them. So for example, one of the things I used to have to do is find a way to, for example, get the equipment that the people needed closer to where they're actually working. Why would you want them to walk 10 meters instead of 5 if they can? Because over a long day, that makes a lot of difference when it comes to process improvement. So even things that small, Boeing used to pay a lot of attention to. So that is the efficiency and productivity dimension, which we're all very familiar with. The second dimension, which is the quality and consistency, that's absolutely a very important one, because that's usually what's linked to customer satisfaction, right? The more consistent we are producing the service that we produce or the product that we produce, the more the happier the people are on the other side. They know that we can get our work done, they know we can do it well, and they know that we're always gonna be on time. So that makes them usually pretty happy. The third one is competitive advantage. And we talked a little bit about competitive advantage before, which is basically this idea that you have a super strength, right? So its strength is that we have a really nice culture. A super strength is that we have, let's say, not only a nice culture, but it's a very efficient culture as well, right? And very few organizations have that as well. So that becomes like a super strength, and it becomes harder for other organizations to copy us. So that's a competitive advantage. So continuous improvement helps us usually gain those competitive advantages. And it helps us do, offer or better performance in whatever we're doing, better being able to adapt, and so on. So that's why we start getting those strengths can become super strengths. So for example, if I can put together a bid for a job faster and more efficient and have a better success rate over time than other organizations, that allows me, that becomes a competitive advantage for us over time. Because basically our other organizations can't do it the same way that we can. Any questions on those three so far? And then we have the role of mindset. And basically, this is the mindset that helps us embrace change and want to improve and strive for improvement and allow us to use and apply tools like PDCA, the one that we're going to spend most of the class on today. And then culture, right? I mean, culture is very important. And as we want to develop this culture that we talked about a little bit earlier, that appreciates and that is a little bit more focused on, let's say, process improvement, for example, right? Then this culture will shift. So as the mindset of our teams shift, as the people that we're training that are coming in new, right, get trained and join us more and more, this culture shifts more and more and more to become more like, let's say, Toyota. Toyota is very famous worldwide in having a culture that is focused 100% on process improvement. That is the thing that has given them the edge over most of other companies around the world for the last 30 years or so, is this ability to produce excellent quality cars at really good prices in comparison with others. Excellent engines, excellent everything, right? For a really, really good price over time. They didn't get there overnight. They got there with this obsession towards process improvement. And then it became the culture. So everybody that hires, everybody that works for Toyota, they all think about and they are rewarded by and in the, in relation to activities that have to do with process improvement. So everything from top to down speaks process improvement. Amy.
So I'm noticing a question in the chat from Harry. How do you measure mindset?
Harry, you always ask very hard questions, Harry. So that's a really good question, Harry. So the mindset is tricky, right? Because it's not something that we can directly measure, but it's basically that feeling that we develop within the organization based on what we are focused on, what do we appreciate and what do we reward. So when we are always, like, for example, when we say, oh, hey, do you have a process improvement mindset? We're talking about, are you actually thinking about process improvement throughout the day when you're doing one activity to the other? It does not mean that every activity you do, you're going to be like, oh, let me improve this process. What this means that we're conscious about that. And that only happens by us talking about it, by us rewarding for it, by us encouraging it, and by us basically making it a central theme for our organization. So, for example, I was so immersed into process improvement for a while that I used to apply it on everything, even washing dishes when I go home. I used to be like, oh, there must be a faster, better way of doing this, and I would like actually think about it every time. I was young, single at the time, living alone. And every day I will think about it, be like, how can I do this better? And the idea will be is how can I use the least amount of soap, but at the same time, and water, but at the same time, wash the dishes in the same quality that I washed dishes before. And it really took over my thinking. It was a part of what I did every day, whether it was in my personal life or whether it was it was too much. But that's the idea, is that are we going to be embracing it to the point where we think about it, we put marks, we're like, hey, maybe I need to come back to this thing later. Amy, you had a question?
Yes, well, I mean, just a really simple way maybe to measure this is how often are employees coming forward with new ideas about improving process, right? Like how many of the employees, how often are they coming forward? And that definitely would be an indicator that they're in a mindset of, thinking about process improvement.
Yeah, absolutely. And then in the end of the year, right, how many projects we actually accomplished that have to do with process improvement? Are we taking time to, let's say, celebrate those, like, let's say, accomplishments? So all the way from ideas to the end, we can come up with different points there where we're measuring how much our organization really thinks and obsesses about process improvement. Now, if we, and this is something you're probably going to talk about in the creativity and innovation, organizations that shut down people's ideas, basically people learn little by little not to offer ideas. So you start seeing that those ideas will dwindle more and more, just like, because basically every time I say, hey, I want to do this, then my boss shuts me down, right? And then you're like, oh, okay, well, I'm not gonna participate in that anymore. So you see that well of ideas from the team get less and less. And there are companies that do very exciting events, like let's say once a year or once every 6 months, where they will do, like, let's say half a day on a Friday, that it will be all about just coming up with ideas. And they'll have games, and they'll have ways of having people participate in different ways, whether they're close or they're far, they can participate online. And in those activities, that's when they get a lot of those ideas out. They pass out sometimes some prizes, stuff like that. And that, again, shows people that we do care about this. Now, the problem is if you throw something that big together, then you're going to get stuck with, let's say, 100 ideas. And if you don't have a team on the back end that is able to sift through those ideas and actually pick some of them and start working on those ideas and highlight that to the rest of the organization, then people little by little feel that, oh, they really don't care. They just wanted us to, they just wanted to say that they care, but, they really don't, because look, we gave them all those good ideas and nothing happened. So we have to be, if we ask for rain, if we pray for rain, we have to be ready to deal with the mud. So we have to be careful. Like, for example, IBM one time did this exercise and they ended up with, I don't remember how many, it was like 30,000 ideas. And then it became a nightmare because who is going to be qualified enough? We're talking about a monstrous company, tons of divisions, very smart people doing all kinds of stuff, very unique stuff. And now everybody put in their ideas, and who's going to be qualified enough to go through them? And who has the time? So we have to be careful about what we ask for to make sure that on the back end, we can deal with it, present it properly, and show our organization that, yes, it does matter. There's also here another comment I see, and also how they just respond to work-related issues. Yes, absolutely. Thank you. Any other comments on this? Okay, so this is basically what you see. This is the PDCA cycle, which is plan, do, check, and act. And I'm going to give you a little example that goes with each one of them. And I also have a slide here that explains each one of them a little bit more in detail. Okay. Now, you all have those slides, so I'm not going to spend too much time on those, but I'm going to walk through them. And then I'm going to put you in a team to do an exercise so you can go back and read those and spend time on them and discuss them. But going back here to the first one. So, like, let's say, for example, right, that you find out that, or you ask your team, hey, what's going on? Is there anything we can fix? And then somebody says, yes, customer requests take way too long. For us to handle customer requests is taking way too long. People are complaining about it. How do we fix this? So people sit down, they start talking about this. They start talking about how other people in other industries, what do they do, right? And they come up with a goal of saying, you know what, let's try to reduce this time by 20%. And then they say, okay, how are we going to do this? And they start having those kind of conversations. And then somebody on the team says, you know what, I work for this other organization that used this awesome software. And the software can actually help us, reduce this customer request processing time. It's a great software. If we use it, it will help us a lot. So now what the team would do is we'll say, okay, we have this awesome idea. Let's check it out. So they will bring that software and they will test it on a very small group of customers. And then they will collect data and monitor this and see how is this working. That will be the check part. So it includes both, right? What you see on your, this includes, hold on, I moved too fast. I went from planning. So that was planning, the stuff we talked about, up to coming up with basically the idea. Then we're like, okay, what are we going to do? So we're like, we're going to test it. We're going to implement and do the data collection on a small group, like I said. And then we're going to check. So this is where we're going to actually analyze a lot of this data And we're going to start comparing this data with what we did before and with our expectations. And then let's say in this case, the team realizes that, oh, wow, we actually did reduce this customer processing time by a certain percentage. And we're like, this is awesome. So people get excited. And then we act. So acting means, okay, let's roll this out across the entire organization. So then we say, okay, let's everybody use this tool from now on. And then what do? We monitor and we collect more data and we watch, make sure we got our 15-20% that we were hoping for across the entire organization. And then we continue to watch for further improvement, because there might be another tweak that we can do that can give us another 5-10%. So does this make sense? This is it. It's very simple. So this is the cycle, right? In the beginning, we want to come up with a plan, right? We want to come up, just like we said here. Do you remember? This is my favorite graph here. Plan, do, check, and act. And that's what we're trying to do. Okay, so now we're going to move to this slide where basically I want you to actually test this on your own organization. Oh, hold on. Betty, question?
Yes, please. What's the difference between do and act? In regular English, do and act sounds like the same thing. Or maybe I missed something because it
Yes, no, very
looks
good
like
question.
act is review. Mhm.
Yeah, the way they have this, the people that came up with this idea, they said that the do stage is basically involved the testing and change, testing the change. So for them, that was the second piece. And that was basically you trying to implement and collect some data, but on a small subset, right? You're not going to roll this out on the entire organization. Versus later on, they said stage number 3 is check. That's how they came up with the names. We don't have to obsess too much about the names. What matter more is basically what we do in those 4 stages. So think about them as 4 stages. So then you basically check, you make sure that that little test that we did actually worked. And then when that works, that takes us to act. And the way they looked at it, Betty, is that act is when we basically roll it out across the entire organization. So for them, that's actually the organization acting on this. But again, if there is a better word that you like, you can use, but that's how this tool was developed. But that's the idea for this tool.
Thank you. Thank you. I
Yeah.
get it.
Yeah. And I hope you find it fun and simple enough that we can use it and utilize it. And this is what we want to try to do now is to actually, we're going to divide you. Charlie has been working on putting you in teams. You're going to work mainly with teams from your own RLC this time. And the idea is to come up with, identify an area that needs a little bit of improvement, whether it's responding to customers or whether it's whatever it is. And then we want to try to develop a plan, just like we did, of how would we use those 4 stages to actually try to improve that specific process. Does that make sense? And I'm going to give you about
Yes,
20 to
yes.
25 minutes. Essie.
Yes, it makes a lot of sense.
All right. So we're going to have a lot of fun now. So Charlie, how are we doing?
Yeah, sounds good. So I'm gonna open up the room so you guys are gonna join them.
So how many teams does it look like we're going to have?
So we're gonna have 3 breakout rooms. I'm joining South Africa and West Africa Dakar together just because there's only like a couple people from each, so they're just gonna go together. And then the other two rooms are going to be just the RLCs. So,
Thank you, Charlie.
yeah. And then I have some questions for 3 of the people. So, Yali Rich, which RLC are you a part of? Trying to find that out. And people should be able to join now.
Richard is from Ghana.
Ghana, okay. And then KU Yali, which one are you from?
Kenya, East Africa. Sorry, I'm using the office laptop.
Oh, no problem, no problem. East Africa, okay. So that'll be 1, 2, 3. Okay. And then Renee. Which one? Are you from?
So I'm part of the Ghana RLC.
Ghana.
I'm a
Okay.
national service personnel here.
Sounds good. All right, I'll get you guys there.
Yeah, I was hoping we don't end up with
Yeah,
that many people in one group, but
there's a lot in Ghana, I think.
yeah, I don't know now if it's too late, if we can break them into 2 sub teams.
Yeah, I can do that. No problem. Do you want another group, like just make them 2 separate?
Because it seems like we have what, 3, 6, 7?
Yeah, we have 7 right now, and it's gonna be 8, so I'll split them into 2 because
Yeah, so then we divide them into 2, 4, 4. What do you think, Amy?
It looks like 3 haven't joined though for that group. I wonder if they are at their computers.
Oh, that's true.
Carolyn, James, and Patricia, are you here?
Yeah, it looks like only 4 people are in that group right now, or 5.
Okay, so Carolyn is in now. Now there's 4.
So,
I guess we might be okay because by the time the other ones join, it might be too late anyway. So 5 is fine, probably, right?
yeah.
What do you think, Amy?
I think so. I'm just concerned that if it's broken down into 2 groups, then we might not have enough people in there.
Yeah, yeah. So maybe it's fine this way. I wish we can find a way to rename the rooms instead of room 1.
Oh, I can do that too. Let me try that.
You also can?
I was able to. I think I had to do it when the rooms aren't started.
Oh, okay. Yeah, don't worry.
Sorry about that. Yeah, I should
No,
have
no,
done that last time.
It's fine, but I just thought about it now. So,
Yeah.
oh, that's cool. Thanks, man. Now I can jump around and talk to the different groups.
Yeah.
Okay, now that room has 5 people.
6. I guess we're just gonna have to let it be, right? Amy?
Yeah. And
I
Charlie, I got a message that Jasper was trying to join my Zoom room, so he was using the link from last week. So I sent him an invite with this link.
Okay. Yeah.
So he may be showing up soon.
Let me see. Yeah, I'll keep an eye out. You know what his email is?
So I just sent him a message
Okay.
inviting him directly to the
Okay.
to this
That's fine.
call.
I
I'm
was
gonna
just
go around,
looking-
make sure they understand what's, what they need to do. I'll be back.
Okay,
good.
sounds good.
All right, welcome back, everyone. I think everyone is back. All right, hopefully this was fun. Obviously, we don't have tons of time, but I think most of you accomplished quite a bit in this time. So I was wondering now if we can basically take turns in sharing our PDCA strategies for the projects that we picked. So if there is a spokesperson for the team, that will be wonderful. And then the idea will be is please share with us what was the challenge that you decided to work on. Is it considered for your organization, is it considered a big challenge, medium challenge, or a small challenge? And then how did you decide that you're gonna try to tackle it? Sounds good? So who would like to start?
Faris, seeing that we were group one, we will begin. So I'm the spokesperson for group one. So the problem that we want to create a solution for is the fact that we constantly get questions from young people who are interested in participating in our program, and we just don't have the resources to respond to all the questions, to all the young people, timers. And what we've discovered is that in most instances, the questions that are asked are similar. So meaning that if you were to invest in having someone man our social media platforms or our website, individual would continuously be answering the same questions. So then the solution that we basically want to explore is how to have an automated response, either built in to our recruitment website, or have a WhatsApp number that we can circulate that young people can pose questions to, and it will provide automated responses. So obviously we still need to conduct an exercise in terms of what the cost implication of both interventions would be. But ideally, because I would assume that this cut across all the 4 centers. I mean, the questions that are asked are similar across all 4 of us. So probably maybe the best option is to investigate whether we can have an automated response built into the website, that recruitment website that we're currently developing for Yali Africa. So the idea would be we would maybe test it out in one of the 48 countries that we have coverage on, to basically gather all the data to ensure that there are no follow-up questions that emanate from the automated responses that are not answered, and also that there are no other questions that we were not able to capture in our initial configuration in terms of what we respond to. And once we've gathered all the data, then we will be in a position to make an informed decision in terms of scaling the solution across the 48 countries. So yeah, so that's our intervention. It's something that hasn't been put into practice as yet, but it's something that we are busy contemplating on our best to provide a solution to.
Yeah, no, that's great. And this is fantastic. So in process improvement, it's about something that we already do. And then we want to, obviously find a better way of doing it, right? And you already have to deal with this issue. And you feel like it's not being dealt with perfectly. So you're coming up with a better way to do this. And then you're going to test it and then scale it. So this is great. Thank you, Harry. I have a comment for you. I don't know if you all considered this idea, but I've seen this work before where some organizations utilize the alumni for this type of job as well by, selecting some of the best alumni that they've had and some of the ones that are most active, and finding a way to engage them and ask them to be like ambassadors for your organization. And they do that by, helping with those kind of requests. So when young people call and they say, hey, how was this experience how has it been? What do you learn? That one way is to connect them to some of those ambassadors, and then they can explain to them, hey, this how my experience have been. And I've seen different organizations use this differently. Like some people will pay those ambassadors. Some people will find other ways to recognize those ambassadors, like once a year in some event, they will invite them and, like thank them and make a big deal out of it, or so I mean, I don't know if this, could be partially something that you guys consider, but it crossed my mind.
Yeah, that is a great suggestion. It's something that we do as well in terms of how we spread the word about the program, and also to see how we can get qualifying young people to apply. So that would also be in addition to that, because what we've identified is that there's like common questions that are continuously being asked, like how much does it cost to participate in the program, and so forth. So those could have automated responses.
Yes. And there's also on websites, a lot of times they use those Q&A, like common questions and answers, and people have lists over there. So any question that you get asked more than, let's say, 10 times, then it should go on that, common, questions. And then basically people can go and click and be like, oh, here's the answers for those. But this is great. All right, so somebody from room 2, let's see, that was Carolyn, Barbara, Renee, Essie, that team. Would you like to share with us?
Carol, Carolyn, Barbara, James, either of you, please jump in and share what we came up with.
Hello. Yeah, so James here. We looked at our alumni engagement and ways of improving integration of new alumni into the respective country chapters. So now each of the 9 countries that we select and train young people from has an existing alumni chapter. So after each training or each cohort has completed its training, we integrate the new alumni into their respective chapters. And so we went through the various steps in doing that and settled on the integration activity itself, because that's where we have more of a Zoom call with the chapter executive and the new alumni, and sort of formally introduce either side to the other and encourage the chapter to integrate them, add them to their social media pages, their mailing list, and to run them through the activities or planned activities for the year, and encourage alumni on their part to also participate actively in the activities of the respective chapters. So we talked about ways in which we could make it more vibrant, because it's more of the current process looks more of a formal approach, and so we need to make it more vibrant, engaging them, finding ways of possibly getting them to work in groups, seeing where their strengths are in terms of alumni and what they can bring to the chapter. So when the chapter gets to know the strengths of each new alumni, it helps them to bond more and to be in a position to assign different alumni to various work groups or committees to provide the chapter overall with support in these specific areas. So that's what we discussed here.
Thank you, James. Thanks. So anybody wants to add anything to that or ask James questions from anybody else? So so James and team, my question to you is, this problem that you identified, and I wanted to ask that to also Harry's group, is this, what do you consider this, like a big challenge, a medium challenge, or a small challenge for your organization? Like what kind of, how big of a challenge, or how important of a fix this is, or how complicated? I mean, you can choose whatever dimension you want.
I would come in to say it's a big challenge in the sense of it's an important challenge. You know, it's very important that our alumni get really bonded at the chapter level. And we see a lot more room for that to happen. And so this particular process that we walked through is extremely important. It's the first moment at which they join their chapter. So it's a big, when I use the word big, I mean big in the sense of it's a very important process and therefore an important challenge. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you, Essie. One of the things I discussed, and I didn't discuss this with your team, but I discussed this with another team, was this idea that that it's important that we focus on not only, I mean, it's great to pick challenges that are big, but we want to spread this out as well with time, because we need also the small wins along the way, because the small wins are what motivate our team, what get our team confidence that they know how to improve processes, and that gives them the experience. Because let's say if you give me that job, and let's say I spend a whole year on it and I fail, I might become very scared to take on more process improvement projects. But if you give me, let's say, maybe one small one, one big one to work on, and the small one is something that can get fixed in a month, and we have total control on, because sometimes the projects that we don't have control on sometimes get very frustrated, and they need political, and they need cover, and they need a lot of stakeholders to come together. So as you decide on what projects we should do in the future, I would make a portfolio of a bunch of small projects that we have control on. And I will start some of those teams with that to build this experience, to get some wins, then we celebrate it, right? And then we get new people involved in that, get them trained, right? And then it becomes a culture thing within our organization. So hopefully this helps, but this doesn't. Oh, go ahead, Essie.
I mean, that's very helpful, because I think our experience has been of a win in this area, which is why I think this suggestion came up, because we tried it just somewhere in April. We tried an improvement of a very similar process and immediately had a very big win. And so I think that's why the team even came up with this particular issue, that, yeah, because we can see it's a very big and important issue, and we can address it actually quite easily. And so I like what you said about the confidence, because I think we've gotten a lot of confidence from the one that worked, which makes us see that if we try this new way, yeah, we can get another win. Yeah.
Oh, that's excellent. Yeah, that's exciting. Yeah, and then after a few of those wins, then your team, feels more like, oh, I can start teaching people how to do this, and they start telling other organizations. And yes, absolutely, this is great. So thank you all. Thank you, Essie. Thank you, James. Thank you all. This is awesome. All right, so room 3, that's Betty, George, Beatrice.
Okay, I will come into this one. And so from the East Africa team, we identified the process of connecting alumni to investment or to funding from other sources other than USAID sources, because part of our biggest mandate in the current award that we're implementing is the support of alumni. And for them to grow, because they have been trained and they've been running initiatives, now they need to scale those initiatives. And so they need funding and they need other support, such as, so funding in terms of grants, investments, but also being linked to incubators. So we identified this as the issue we would like to improve. And so the first thing is we identified a process that needs to be very quickened, and that's being able to put together data on what the alumni need, because we can only answer to the problem that they have and not what we're thinking as an RLC. So first we need to find out what they need and what stage their initiatives are at. Are they seed, pre-seed? Are they startups or not even started at idea stage? So we need to find out that. And so we identified one possible solution as putting up an online portal where they're able to log their initiatives in and put data that we can be able to work with. So we're going to be able to, in this case, then also have a section of it having a list of possible organizations that they can work with. And so the matching will become much faster because they are also able to benchmark with other successful stories among alumni on this. And then it also means that we are freeing the alumni team the time where they keep calling and following up. So this portal is sort of takes a life of its own in terms of being able to have visibility on both sides, the supply and demand side of this whole process. So we agreed that we would do a pilot on a few alumni. We may not have to fly them in, but then we're able to easily access them and be able to put their information on the portal. And then on the team side, we have to then follow up on data entry just to make sure that that data is going in and that the kind of data that they're putting in is relevant, or it's going to answer to the questions that we have. That's the do. And then we go to check. So how do we currently measure success? First, we measure success in the efficient provision of services in terms of here, do we have an MOUs that are signed? Do we have amounts of funds? Can we measure the amounts of funds accessed? Can we also have an alumni satisfaction survey here so that we know whether this is meeting their needs? How many requests, for example, have we addressed on the portal to know whether we're doing the right thing? And then we recently held a capacity assessment that shows the gaps. So have we addressed these gaps that were then identified in this capacity assessment that we recently conducted? In terms of ACT, we have an ongoing process where we are doing current country-specific calls where we are having to ask the alumni what the gaps are, what kind of partners are they looking for. And so in the same way, we are going to be able to be specific on what the needs of the alumni generally are. We also have an event that is planned on the next month. So we hope to link the alumni and alumni initiative owners to organizations that are in the investor space, that we are also having to train them on investor readiness because we need to match them with the requisite funders. We now understand that there are funders at different levels. Some funds small amounts and others are huge funders. So we're trying to get the mix and be able to connect them with the right match in terms of investments, grants, incubation, those kind of services that will then scale the initiatives. Yeah, thank you.
Amazing. Thank you so much. That is very detailed and excellent job. This is great. I'm very excited about all those projects. I think those are all really exciting projects. Does anybody have any questions before we move on to Betty and Beatrice and George's team about what they were working on, how they came up with those solutions or anything like that? Okay, so yeah, really excellent, excellent job. So I hope this gives you, more excitement towards process improvement. I always believe that it's really important, very powerful. I still try to apply a lot of those concepts in my life, whether it's at work or at home. I have a few extra slides for you. I will give you the highlights of them briefly, just so you can see them, but then those are for you. So then that way you have extra material with you. So for example, this slide here is one of my favorites. It talks about the common barriers, and one of the big one is usually resistance to change. Those, by the way, they match. So A matches with A. That means that this is a common strategy to overcome this barrier. So just put that in your notes. So resistance to change, how do we usually deal with it? We involve everyone in the planning process and clearly communicate the benefits of the methodology. So it's a lot of selling, right? It's a lot of selling, it's a lot of training, and so on, okay? And then B matches with B. So lack of understanding of the PDCA process. Okay, what do? We provide training and resources. And that's why it's important that that first couple of teams that we have working on those projects and getting a little bit of those wins along the way, that they can start training the people after them. And little by little, you can have one extra person join that team. Another person can get busy doing something else. And little by little, you can train a big chunk of your team in this methodology, right? And then the last one is talking about inadequate resources. And yes, that's always a challenge for all organizations. But that's, again, another very important reason of why we need to start small sometimes. Because a small thing does not require us a huge amount of work. But then once we win, we get confidence, we know it helps us, and then we can start doing more and more. And guess what? This is the one way for us to actually free up resources. So even though we don't have that much resources, process improvement is one of the few things that we have in our tools that allows us to get to the point where we can actually free up a few of those resources. Okay, and then I left for you a couple other slides, so please feel free to go through them and let me know if you have any questions. But this here focuses on this idea that, okay, we need to get everyone involved, we need to communicate well, we have to be willing to start again, just like we discussed, right? If this project is not actually improving anything, we need to be able to stop and go back and plan again. Like, okay, why didn't this mini test not work? Let's come up with a better plan, right? Let's test it again and see if that works. And that's how we develop this correct mindset that we have. And then that was a slide for summary of the stuff that we were talking about. And I put here for you my email because I really want you, once you had the chance to go through this, to feel free to reach out to me, because if you want more resources, please let me know. I'll be more than happy. I also gave you my phone number last time, so please feel free to contact me anytime. Any questions before we end for the day? I left a few minutes for that. We have like 5 or 6 minutes, I think. So how do you feel about?
Yeah, so maybe I can ask a question.
Yeah.
Faris. Yeah. So there's an element I'm picking around this because the way we work is we kind of and maybe this is what you just shared before the exercise. Yeah. So you realize the process of improving processes, you know, within our organizations is kind of very iterative. Yeah, meaning that like from the East Africa RLC, from the what we call the management review meeting, which occurs every Friday at 8 a.m. We present, you know, challenges, and then of course we deliberate on some suggested solutions. Yeah, so we pick one that we feel is optimal, and then of course it goes through your process. You know, we plan to do. Yeah, so you realize we are just integrating this into our process of working. It is not something that is kind of standalone, because if it was standalone, then it could mean, you know, the concept of entrepreneurship is not coming in, because you see, as a team, our work is mainly to troubleshoot problems, or rather pick problems or pain points and suggest solutions and implement and move. Yeah, which again ties to what you mentioned when you are starting out, about the environment, simply allowing team members, to also take risks, be open-minded, in terms of suggestions and all this. So how much, different is some of the procedures and processes of working vis-a-vis doing this, as an add-on, and what would be the implication on the resources and mainly time, and LOE, within an organization? Because I'm thinking the best way is simply to integrate this process into our day-to-day work within the organization, rather than consider it, separate, and therefore we have to do a pilot, because if we integrate it, it becomes a bit cheaper in terms of time and, the LOE which has to be paid for. Thank you, and over.
Thank you, George. That was yeah, I mean, so entrepreneurship, I mean, what you were talking about is coming up with new projects, right? That is very, very important. And okay, we're going to solve this problem, or we're going to do this, or we're going to do that. This is all excellent, right? The process improvement is kind of the process that comes after those things have been established, because you say, oh, okay, we need to do X, right? We need to become better at raising funds, for example, right? And you start working on that. You come up with a plan, you flush it out, you practice it, and then, oh, worked, right? Now I'm being able to get some money from, for example, this type of donor, and I'm very happy about that. The process improvement is the process that comes after that, that says, okay, we did this a year ago, and things are great, but then is there a better way to do this thing that we've already done? Okay, this could involve, things as small as even office organization. Like Boeing had us apply a lot of those techniques on just, for example, the idea that if I am sick one day, okay, the person sitting next to me should be able to do the critical jobs that I have to do for that day, no matter what. So I had to develop a process. I had to have a binder that included the critical things that I do for the day and how to do them. Not everything, but the critical things, because this idea that you are dependent on me for that day to get the work done, that was not even okay with Boeing. Does that make sense? So even the way you receive email, the way you receive materials, the way you print materials, anything like that could be a candidate for a process improvement initiative. And yes, this is something that comes later. And yes, you need to incorporate it when you're a small organization. You cannot have a whole unit just dedicated for this. So it has to become something that we do on the side, little by little, incorporate it into our work, and then reward people for it. So anyway, we're coming to an end. So I want to give you a break for the ones who want to leave, because Dr. Karam will start with you in 10 minutes. But Essie, we can chat. I'm happy to stay. So for the rest of you, you can take break if you want. Essie.
Yeah. So my question is with what you just said, that we should be able to have a way of working such that if I'm not there, the critical tasks that I need to be carrying out, somebody else can just easily step in and pick them up. So my question was how do we create such a culture, where we are actually able to do that, where I can miss a day and someone can just come and sit in my seat and see in my portfolio everything I need to do and are able to do it while I'm not there.
Yeah, actually, see, that's an excellent question. So there's another tool in process improvement. It's called 5S methodology. And that's the one that they like to usually use in office spaces. I actually have a PowerPoint on that I've been working on for you as like a bonus thing to send you. So I'm gonna finish that and I'm gonna send it to you. And then if you have questions when you see it, please reach out to me, because there's a lot of resources on this. It comes from Japan, this methodology, but this one is perfect for office space. And the idea is that everything gets labeled. So, you know, all the drawers, everything gets labeled. Every person will have a binder that has the critical things that I do on Monday, critical things that I do on Tuesday. And then inside the binder, there is an explanation of how you get those things done. Oh, you open my computer, you go to this file, and this report, you run to the boss and you give it to to the boss, you know, and then that way, what happens is you create this very organized space where everything should be where it belongs. So then when I come in and I sit instead of you, it takes me just a few minutes to be able to follow, and then that reduces the pressure on you not being there every single day, for example. Again, this is only for critical, what in process improvement we call critical path, meaning the minimum, most important things that need to get done for that day. This does not include everything you do, but every Monday I have to present this thing at 10 o'clock, you know? So I'll send you that and I'll be happy to discuss that later. We can do a call. Anybody who wants to join is welcome. But
I'd like that, because I mean, this gives the structure for how we could actually do that. But there's also the culture of doing that, like what people would feel about actually working in this way, and how we can build that culture where people feel happy and okay, non-resistant, you know, welcoming of such a way of working. So that would be very useful.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll have some slides about that too in that, and we can discuss it a lot more. But yes, it takes engagement, getting everybody engaged and showing people the benefits of doing this. And you know, the challenge sometimes is that people feel that, oh, we're doing this because you're trying to replace me. And that's the message that we want to make sure that it never comes across. And then when we do things like performance evaluations, we want to make sure that we reward people for that type of behavior, that you know, you did this, we're very thankful for you, because now, you know, we can, you know, we're doing things better, faster. And now, you know, we want you to train this other person, and we get more and more people involved in the process. But we should never ever use those, anything related to process improvement, we should never use in a negative way, because if it's ever used as a negative way, people will never want to get involved again. And negative means, oh, I just improved the process and now I don't need your job. So process improvement was never made for that. Process improvement was made, yes, we want to try to create more resource, more space, but then we deploy our resources now better. That's what it's supposed to be, not a excuse to eliminate, you know, jobs or things like that are very, very negative. Because once it goes that way, then there is no coming back. It's very hard to fix the culture then.
Thank you. That's very helpful. Okay, so I'll step out also for a quick lunch.
Sounds good. Sounds good. It's good to see you all. Hi, Liz.
Hello there. How are you?
Good. How are you?
Good, good. I'm not sure if everyone is in or out, but should we come back at maybe 10:10 Eastern Standard Time, so we give a full 10 minutes if anyone was staying around for your last? Amy, what do you think?
So it's hard to know who's actually stayed. Almost everyone could have left when Ferris.
For me, I'd like to talk a little bit about mentoring. We'll talk about building relationships with mentors. And then I'd like to end by introducing or maybe reacquainting some of you with two approaches to coaching. And so these are two very common research-based approaches to coaching, which I think can be very helpful in terms of capacity building for internal purposes within an organization. And so that's one of the purposes, I hope, of our time today, is in the back of your mind, you're thinking about how we can build capacity internally. Prior to working in academia, I worked in organizational development for a Fortune 500 company. And one of the things that we emphasized, particularly with our mid-level and upper-level managers, was that they were not eligible for another promotion unless they had mentored, coached, and trained their replacement. We believe very strongly that leaders in our organization had the responsibility to train and mentor as part of their job, as part of their role, and we took that very seriously. So, and we found that it really did help both in terms of leadership development, but then also kind of cross training and helping individuals grow as mentors as well. So I'm going to start by asking a question that kind of is a lead in to mentoring. And that question is this: who have you learned the most from in your career? And so this could be your career with Yali or in other aspects of your career. And you can come off mute or raise your hand, whatever you would like. Jasper, yes, please, thank you.
I may make reference to about 3 people,
Okay.
if time will allow that. One is my father, who was then the assistant headmaster, and my biological father, who mentored me from birth, even whilst he was then the assistant headmaster of the secondary school that I went. And also my previous boss, who was the one who actually mentored and giving me a life when I talk today about career. Everything that I am today, to some extent, he was the one that supported me, led me through all my mistakes, corrected me with love, and then also find a way to reprimand me if he has to do it. But every time that he tried to do that, he always tell me or show me the reason why he has to do what he's doing. And then another one that I want to talk, that's the final person, is my coordinator on the project before I joined Yali. She is a Danish, and in fact, she actually make everything possible for me to develop into the personality that I am today. So these 3 people, I think, affected my career and my personality so much. Thank you.
Thank you. If I could ask a follow-up question.
Yes.
The second person that you described, you mentioned that she was helpful in developing your personality. Could you expand on that a little?
Hello, I didn't get you. Can Elizabeth?
I'm curious, the second mentor that you mentioned, your professional mentor.
Okay.
I believe you said that her influence shaped your personality. Is that what you said?
Yes. He actually shaped my personality and the way that I think about leadership. And also about human relationship, how you relate with people, so that people can help you to do what you have to accomplish. And then also, he often have a way that will make you to do things that on your own you might not be willing to do it, but it make it somehow fun.
Okay.
And so that you are doing it, but you don't know that this thing that you are doing. So that alone taught me a whole lot of things that how you can work around people, understand people's vulnerability, so that when you ask them to do things that they don't want to do, they will not create resistant barriers that will affect your progress. But then you take them through a process, then they will enjoy the process whilst they are helping you to achieve something. Yeah. So for me, anytime, even my family is aware of this, anytime we are talking, his name just pop up, the first person among the list that actually has made you to be who you are today. So any day, anytime I want to talk about him anywhere that I go. Yeah.
That's great. I think you provided some fantastic examples of several different people who have been important mentors in your life. I'd like to hear from someone else in the group as well. If you can describe who have you learned the most from in your career, and maybe what would be key takeaways from your interactions with that person? And again, you can feel free to raise your hand or just come off mute as you prefer. Harry, yes, thank you for jumping in.
Can I advance the concept of being self-taught? That I don't think throughout my career trajectory, I had an official mentor-mentee relationship. So meaning that all the knowledge that I gain has been, I think, primarily through colleagues, people that I work with, who would serve as a soundboard and be in a position to offer advice, and also basically participating in continued learning activities. So yeah, so I think fundamentally, I never really had an individual that I could point at and say, this is the person that assisted me in crafting my career trajectory. In actual sense, I think the person that made a significant contribution to my working life was an individual that after I completed high school, sponsored me in terms of providing funding for my higher education. So that basically changed my life. So if I had to point at someone, that would be it. So not necessarily mentoring me, but making available the resources that enabled me to improve myself.
Yes, yes.
So yeah.
Very good point. And I really appreciate that you talked about, or that you introduced your comments by suggesting that we advance the concept of being self-taught. I think that is very common as an individual experience in the workplace, either because formal mentoring arrangements don't exist, or maybe they are not as effective as they are intended, or perhaps it's not a priority for the organizations where we're working. And so one of the things that I appreciated that you added to your discussion is how you had interactions with different individuals in your workplace who helped you, served as a sounding board, and that was supplemented by your own engagement in continuous learning activities. So I'd like to now switch gears a little bit, thinking about the concept of mentoring internally. And so internal to the YALI organization, not necessarily with the participants at YALI. And I'd like you to describe the ways in which you do mentorship well. And if you don't have a formal mentorship program at your location, perhaps the way that you coach or train, try to identify 3 aspects of your mentoring, coaching, training that you think you do particularly well at your location. And Amy and Charlie, if I could ask you at this time, we're going to take a pause here to go into breakout rooms so that you can have a discussion around what those areas may be. And then we'll come back together as a group to share some of those experiences and learnings. So Amy or Charlie, could you please send to breakout groups the participants? Looks like the breakout rooms have been launched, and so please join as you are able. We'll come back in, let's say, 8 minutes. Thank you so much. Of, what we think of as a mentor, and this was alluded to in all of your comments. It's a network of relationships that critically provides task, emotional support, as well as someone who serves as a role model. In our discussions, I think Harry advanced the concept of kind of being self-taught and not necessarily having a formal mentor. It's a very common experience. And so I think we can think of mentors in terms of both those that are formally assigned and in your organization, or informally, people that you go to as a sounding board. So if you are in a role of mentoring and within your organization, I think it's important to keep in mind that you don't have to be everything to the person that you're mentoring. I often hear, in fact, we're in the process of assigning 60 entrepreneurship mentors here within the management department at JMU. And there is a lot of concern about the time commitment and having to be, have all of the expertise necessary to mentor our students. And what we try to reassure them with is that you don't need to be everything to your protege or to your mentee. And in fact, you are a person, but really in terms of the entrepreneurship projects that we're taking on here, there are a network of resources. And so whether that's for a new venture, whether that's someone who is a professional mentor, it is important to consider that there should be numerous people involved in any mentoring relationship. So I talked about providing task support. And so we heard some great examples from the breakout rooms about mentors providing critical feedback. And so I think Carolyn did a great job talking about how you can be, how the director in that center maybe will ask someone to respond to emails and then provide feedback on how well that responsibility was performed. That's a great example of providing task support in the mentoring relationship. So someone who provides critical, constructive, and developmental feedback on the responsibilities that you have. I would suggest to you, though, that good mentors do more than just provide task support. And this kind of falls into another category that we classify broadly as providing emotional support. So this can be things like counseling, affirmation, encouragement. Last year, I was relatively new to JMU and new to my role here, having come from a university. And in my role, I oversee the 35 or so management faculty in our department. And there were numerous faculty who very tragically were experiencing some pretty significant personal events. And so as I was trying to be a support person for our new faculty, I found that I really took on a lot of that, what they were kind of struggling with. And that became really emotionally challenging for me. And so in my conversations with the dean, I said, what can I do? I really have a hard time going from one meeting with a faculty member who has a very significant issue going on with their child, to then going to a faculty meeting, to then going to teach my class. I needed some strategies and some ways to better handle some of the emotions that I did not anticipate in this role. And very fortunately, the dean provided some great suggestions for that. So scheduling breaks between meetings that I knew were going to be emotionally challenging, even things like taking a walk, engaging in meditation, having a person, a peer to decompress with who had experienced something similar. And so he was great at providing a network or connections for me. I think it is common that we have some emotional needs, and effective mentors can do well by providing good emotional support or connections for individuals that they're mentoring. And so the other, I think, important aspect of really strong mentoring is to serve as a positive role model. And so engaging in the types of behaviors that you would like your mentee to see. And so if that's an opportunity for you to have someone shadow you in your job, to have someone see you interact with critical stakeholders in your organization, to have you in a meeting. And so that could be when I'm conducting performance evaluations. I may have the assistant department chair in the evaluations so that I can better train that person as a role model in that particular responsibility. So I would like to encourage us to think about mentoring as kind of encompassing these three areas. And then to keep in mind that truly the best mentoring relationships are a two-way street. And so there importantly can be a give and take whereby the mentee or the protege provides valuable input and guidance to the mentor. So whether that's in terms of taking the pulse of what others are thinking in the organization, maybe your mentee or your protege has connections to people within the organization that you don't have on a regular basis, and they can be a gateway to information for you to learn things about the team. So things that you may not have the capacity to do on your own. I think those are critical aspects to keep in mind as a mentor as to how you can maximize your own personal benefits in the mentoring relationship. And so it's viewed as something that is beneficial to both. The research is pretty clear on the value to mentoring. In fact, a recent study just was published in Personal Psychology, which was one of our top academic journals here in the United States, that talked about the advantages to increasing self-awareness as mentors, increasing relationships beyond the mentoring relationship, and increasing the capacity in interpersonal interactions. So all of these benefits accrued to people who were formally assigned as mentors in mentoring relationships. There were trickle-down effects in other relationships in the workplace, which benefited even beyond the mentoring relationship. So any questions or comments as we move on from there? Okay. Please feel free to interrupt at any time. I'm happy to have this be an interactive dialogue. And so if I keep talking and you want me to pause, jump in or raise your hand, but as you're comfortable. So in the interest of time, I'm going to move forward through a couple of these questions, and I want to talk a little bit about building relationships with mentors. Betty, yes, please.
Thank you, Elizabeth. I think my question is around, other than asking the mentee about what needs they have so they can be connected to a mentor, for example, how we match them in East Africa, how much are you involved in the interaction between the two that doesn't impose too much, but keeps a tab on that the relationship is going on, it's well-meaning, and it's useful for purposes of growing these relationships? You also realize that sometimes these mentor-mentee relationships naturally, almost always naturally come from older persons to younger persons. So there's a lot of also other intricacies or complications that or complexes that can come in those kind of relationships, especially it would be across gender. How do you oversee that successfully without looking like you're meddling in the like in the university system, like you're meddling in the relationship? Thank you.
Betty, that's a great question. And I'm going to respond with two different examples that I'm familiar with that may be helpful to you. And so the first is a mentoring program that we're actually in the process of developing this summer. This is an area of my current research. And so it's fun to talk about this with all of you. This new mentoring program is going to have, as you described, cross-generational mentors with mentees. And so it's very likely that the mentors will be, 20 or 30 years older than the mentees. And there could definitely be some cross-gender mentor-mentee relationships. And also these individuals in this mentoring program will not necessarily have had much interaction prior to this point. And so one of the things that we're doing is we have identified 6 critical skills that we think are important for the mentees to develop. And we are building in, we're calling them question prompts for the mentoring sessions. And so the mentors and mentees are asked to meet once every 2 weeks for 30 minutes. And we provide a series of 3 question prompts that the mentee will ask the mentor. And so one of these could be, for example, handling conflict in the workplace. I'll just give you a common example, right? And so it could be things like, so the mentee could ask the mentor, can you provide an example of a time that you had a conflict in the workplace? How did you navigate that conflict? What would be a way that I could handle conflict more effectively in the future? What are resources for handling conflict? Those kinds of things. And so we have prescribed the overarching theme of the discussions. So things, as I've said, things like interpersonal interactions. So giving and receiving feedback, handling difficult conversations, and interpersonal conflict. And then we have 3 other modules that are more task specific. So things like engaging with others from outside of our department. So if you have someone working in your accounting department and they need, they're going to have increased interactions with someone in your marketing department, then we have, again, kind of a script around a couple questions that will launch the discussion. Now, we anticipate that the discussions will be free form, and maybe they will only need 1 point or 1 question prompt to really get the conversation going. But because we in advance identified a set of kind of professional, like task specific skills, as well as some kind of relationship specific skills that we wanted to focus on in this particular mentoring relationship, we've got these question prompts, as well as a fairly prescribed and specific time frame for these mentoring relationships. As part of that, and I think, Betty, your point is really well taken in terms of how do we know that the mentors and the mentees are providing value? We have developed surveys, 5 minutes or less. Most of them are about 3 minutes, whereby we will solicit feedback, individual feedback from the mentor and the mentee around the value of the conversation, any progress that we see in terms of professional development, ways in which we can improve the sessions, etc. So from that standpoint, it would be a little bit labor intensive on our part in terms of administering it to monitor the feedback, and then potentially just as needed over the course of the mentoring experience, which will ultimately be about a 12 or 14 week mentoring time frame. I have participated and administered other types of mentoring programs where it has been much more free form. And in those situations, it's often been where we do a little bit more advanced work in terms of a pre-survey, questionnaire, pulling resumes or whatever it is related to the people that are going to be involved. And we find similarities that we think will help prompt the relationship. And so these could be things like a common hobby, working in a common functional area, common professional aspiration on the part of the mentee that matches with what the mentor does. Whether that mentee is currently in that relationship or not, it may be helpful for them to see and learn about the career trajectory of the mentor. It could be things in terms of, we know that we have someone in the organization who is very good at navigating some of our external stakeholder relationships, and we're grooming someone for that particular role. And so that's why we've put those two people together. And so, mentoring relationships and mentoring programs, I find are very customizable. And if you've identified the goals that you would like to achieve from both the mentors and the mentees, and you provide a little data to that, I think that it can be pretty powerful at the end for both parties to really see what they can learn as participating in these programs. Is that helpful, Betty?
Yes, very helpful. Thank you very much. I just wanted one quick one. That you said it's 12 to 14 weeks. Is it that way, or is it coaching that is end to end, or is it mentorship that's end to end? Because you can't mentor somebody for 5 years, or maybe you can.
Right.
But what's best practice in terms of a mentorship relationship?
So that's a great question, and I don't know the answer in terms of best practice. We have kind of matched the 12 to 14 week time frame with what we thought was a reasonable expectation for an ask of some of the mentors. The mentors that we've reached out to for this particular mentoring program that I've developed for the fall are pretty seasoned and senior executives within organizations who have a lot on their plate already. They're very busy. And so we wanted to go to them and say, can you, we frame it in terms of 16 hours of the time over the course of the fall, which would be here, September, October, November, December. So we say about 1 hour a week on average, for those 4 months. I think it'll be a little bit less than that. But honestly, the reason that we chose that was in part to have kind of a clear time expectation related to the ask of the mentors. If you wanted to have, now, again, kind of depending on the scope and the outcomes that you're interested in for your mentoring program, it could be shorter or longer. I've done mentoring programs in a summer, that are much shorter, and people's schedules tend to be busier. I've been involved with mentoring programs where we've asked for a year-long commitment. And so I think it depends on some of the goals of what you're trying to accomplish.
Thank you very much.
Yes, of course. Great question. Thank you.
Okay.
Padmore, I think you have your hand raised as well.
Thank you, Elizabeth. So just comparing face-to-face and virtual or online mentorship relationships, are there any advantages of face-to-face versus online mentorships? And how would you make a virtual mentorship relationship work?
So this is a great question. The research is pretty clear that mentoring outcomes tend to be higher for face-to-face interactions. Now, I think this is an ongoing point of research because professionals are becoming more accustomed to having virtual interactions and virtual relationships, particularly because of the pandemic. And so more research that comes out in the next couple of years may provide different kinds of findings. But what seems to be most important is a kickoff meeting or first interaction that is face-to-face. One of the things that we see in those kinds of face-to-face interactions is more conversations that tend to go a little bit what we call like off script. And so conversations about things that are maybe outside of the prescribed content, or conversations that occur, you know, what seems like maybe small talk, you know, walking to and from a coffee shop or to and from an office location where you're going to meet. Those kinds of small interactions build trust, and they build a commitment to the relationship that we don't seem to see when you have, you know, someone logging in for a Zoom meeting or calling someone on the phone in the same way. So I think best practices then related to these virtual interactions really do need to include a little bit more prescription in terms of the content, but then also a reminder of some of the challenges that may occur when you have only virtual interactions. I think sometimes it's easier for people to multitask when they're doing things virtually. And so reminders to be present, to be engaged, ensuring that there are you know, clear outcomes or metrics that are expected after each call or each interaction. One of the things that we are actually doing with the mentoring program that I forgot to mention in response to Betty's question this fall is we have a reading for our mentees that will be in advance of all of their interactions with the mentors. And so it's about maybe 10 to 15 pages. Not a long reading, but it's something on, it's kind of an introduction to the topic. So we're using the mentoring program as a way to prompt some kind of self-learning and kind of, you know, some, you know, continuous kind of professional development, and hopefully a way that also prepares them more for that interaction with the mentor. And so that might be something that you would explore as well. I don't know the data on that, but something that prepares the mentor or the mentee to be a little bit more prepared and engaged in the meeting itself. I do believe that you can have effective virtual mentorships, and sometimes those can be very effective with some additional kind of tweaking and expectations and you know, maybe prompting for the mentor and the mentee. But that's a great question as well. Thank you. Any other questions? Okay. I'd like to touch on this a little bit because I find particularly this is interesting in some of my executive MBA students or students of working professionals, that they have reports kind of similar to what Harry mentioned earlier in our call, that they're primarily self-taught, that they have not had a mentor. So I'd like to kind of introduce some concepts around how to build a great relationship with a mentor in the event that you don't have access to a formal mentoring program at your organization, in the event that you want to ask someone inside or outside of the organization to help be a coach or mentor in your professional life. And so I think one thing that can be really helpful is if you find someone who you think would be a great mentor to you, is to in advance of that, kind of define your goals and needs, right? If you could write a job description of your ideal mentor, and Betty, this might be something when you were talking about, you know, what could we do to try to better match individuals? If you could ask the mentees, what would be your ideal mentor? What kind of knowledge, skills, or abilities would that person have? That might help you pair people in a way that can be very effective for both. Then you can search for mentors, again, if they're not someone that you know, through your, what we call your second degree network, so your professional connections, LinkedIn networks, etc. I remember the very first time I asked someone to be a mentor for me. It was someone that I knew professionally, and we were at a conference. I believe we were in California. And I remember feeling very uncomfortable that I was going to make this ask of someone, but it was a professional in our field who had achieved the kind of scholarly success that I admired. And they were known for being a person with very high ethical standards and, you know, really strong in terms of development of young faculty. And so I emailed her and said, could we have coffee at this conference? She graciously agreed. And I said, the purpose is for me to ask you to be a mentor. I know this may seem a little bit formal, but these are the things that I think that I would really gain by having regular conversations with you. That was probably 8 years ago. And to this day, I still meet with her at conferences where we have coffee, and sometimes it's 30 minutes, sometimes it's an hour. Sometimes we will now, you know, the relationship has certainly evolved, right? We will now text each other, or we'll have calls, or I'll email her things that I think are helpful. I feel responsibility to this person now that she's a very senior executive, to make her time with me valuable. And so things that I see that might be of interest to her, I try to forward them to her. And so being proactive in that mentoring relationship with someone, I think, can be very helpful. Once you have the first meeting, if the mentor is a good fit, that's great news. But if they're not, that's okay too. Sometimes you could have a meeting with someone and that person says, you know, I'm not sure that I'm going to have the time for this, or after the first interaction, particularly if it's someone from your second degree network that you don't know very well, you may want to reconsider whether this person is going to be a good fit for you as a mentor. Sometimes I think it can also be helpful to have questions prepared ahead of time. So specific questions related to how you think you might grow professionally, and ask those questions during the email. Sometimes it can be an accountability. And so you maybe have aspirations of a different career, gaining greater skills, etc. And so this person can help keep you on track in the midst of your very busy professional and personal life. They can you can ask them to check in on you, or you can put a reminder on your calendar of, you know, I need to check in with my mentor with some frequency, as a way of holding yourself accountable for your own professional development. All of those are areas where I think a mentor can be very helpful to your professional growth. And so if you do not have a mentor, but you think that that would be very helpful, I think these are some good strategies for how you can develop a strong mentoring relationship, even outside of something that's formally prescribed by an organization. Any questions? Okay, I think Amy and Charlie, are we still taking a break in the middle of these 2-hour sessions? I feel like this is would be a good time to take a quick break if we need one, or
We certainly can.
okay.
Mhm.
Why don't we do that, just to give ourselves a chance to stretch? I know I'm going to stand up for sure. Sitting for 2 hours is sometimes can be challenging. So why don't we take a 5-minute break? By my clock, that puts us back around 13 to 14 past the hour. And we will move into kind of the conversation around coaching, which I think will be really interesting outside of formal mentoring relationships. These would be questions that you can ask and kind of prescribe methods of interacting with individuals to prompt greater skill development and acquisition with those on your teams. So let's get back together in 5 minutes, so 14 past the hour. Thank you so much. Thanks, Kudi. Okay, welcome back. I think we're at the 14 past the hour by my clock, and so we can begin our conversation about coaching. The difference between what we like to call coaching versus mentoring, if you're not familiar with the distinction, is coaching occurs more informally and is a part of capacity building within organizations. And so is a way in which you intentionally engage in conversations to promote individual learning and growth. There are many, many different approaches to coaching. The two that I'd like to introduce or reintroduce to you today, the first is commonly associated with the work by Michael Bungay Steiner, and he has a book and a podcast and many other resources available to complement his research. The book is called The Coaching Habit, and he likes to describe coaching in that it is the essence of coaching is helping others and unlocking their potential. I really appreciate that because it helps those in the role of the coach keep a focus on unlocking the potential of those with whom we're working. And one of the ways in which effective coaching can be accomplished, so we'll talk about the coaching habit approach versus the appreciative inquiry approach, is by engaging in guided conversations. Michael Bungay Steiner talks about 7 critical questions that you can ask to help people progress in their role. And so I'd like to walk through some of those questions. They're on the slides, and then if you'd like additional resources, I have kind of greater depth provided to all of this coaching material that I would be happy to share as well. And so let me ask a question to start this session. How many of you have experienced a time where someone comes to you in the office, in the hallway, wherever the interaction occurs, and says, I have a question, I have a problem, and I would like your help? If you can raise your hand or share, has that happened to you and how frequently that happens to you? Or you could put something in the chat if you'd like. Cootie, yes, great. Do you mind sharing an example of how or when this happens in your experience?
Thank you. It happens every time because because of the training. It might be someone that you meet physically, or someone who will reach out by WhatsApp or email just to tell you about the problem that he has. It can be like, okay, I'm trying to get into the platform to start my training, but even by reading the tutorials, I can't. Can you help me?
Yes.
Sometimes also it can be very weird questions and you don't really know how to answer, but you first try to understand what is the position of the person you are talking to. And then, go step by step, trying to better understand the real problem and try to find the right answer, specifically because of the job that we are doing. It can be like the RSC launch, let's say, a competition, and they are supposed to win grants. So someone can just ask you, what will I do to win this grant? And you say, okay, had you read the criterias? Do you have questions about how to explain your project and so on? And most of the time, the other question would be, yes, I know all those things, but I want to know the things that are not written on the code for applications. And you need to, be able to answer to this person without frustrating him and making him understand also that there is no other way to do it. It's just what is written, and he need to focus on what he's going to share in his application. Yeah. Thank you.
There's no secret way or secret
Yeah.
answers. Yeah, yeah. So it sounds like it's a mix in your experience of people who come with you with technical questions, people who come to you with questions about the process. What are other experiences about individuals who come to you with types of questions where you have expert knowledge, access to information, or are otherwise situated to provide information that can be helpful?
It's still for me or for the whole group?
Sure, for you would be fine, yeah, or for the whole group.
I will let someone else come in.
Okay, thank you. I could tell you a very personal, or share with you a very personal example that happened in my home this morning. We have a new alarm system for our home that was just installed over the weekend, and my husband works in technology, and so he handles all of the technology issues at our house related to the internet or related to whatever it is, the alarm, etc. And so he this morning said, well, I left the house very early to go exercise. It was before 6 o'clock a.m. And I set off the alarm, waking up the entire house. Everyone was upset, right? Because they did not want to be up so early. And I said, ooh, sorry, I need to run. And I left. And my husband is home with our children. And so when I came back, he said, are you ready to have a conversation about the alarm so that you don't set it off again? And, I can teach you how to do this. And I said, as I, had a cup of coffee, I said, I'm not ready right now. I'm tired. I just exercised. I was up early. Can you just make the decision? And he said to me, no, you need to be engaged and involved in this process also, because you need to be responsible for it. All of that is true. It is not what I wanted to hear at 7:15 in the morning, but I knew that I did need to be involved as, one of the adults in the household that was going to be responsible for this. And so coaching can be a prompt and a reminder sometimes that you do need to be engaged in something that you are responsible for. I have sometimes interacted with individuals who have said to me, I'm very comfortable with you making the decision. And that's fine. And maybe I have made that decision many times. Maybe I've confronted this issue, but that doesn't mean that it absolves the others of the responsibility to engage in the decision making as well. And so coaching can be an opportunity for you to engage others in conversation about the responsibilities that you have in the workplace and how they can take greater ownership even for some of the things that they're doing. So the coaching habit sometimes, the coaching habit framework then has kind of this formulaic set of questions. It starts with the kickstart question. So if someone comes into your office and says, I have a problem, the prompts go something like this. You could say, well, what's on your mind? And you ask the person to describe what it is what kind of challenge it is that they're confronting. So if we just hearken back to 30 minutes ago to our conversation on mentoring, maybe you have someone in your office who you're now going to task developing a mentoring program. And the conversation could go something to the effect of, I'm not sure what kind of outcomes would be relevant to a mentoring program that we were going to develop internally. And I could see many of you being in a role where you are well positioned to prescribe the outcomes that would be of interest. But I would encourage you to what we call tame your advice monster. There are certainly situations where your expertise is important and relevant and a project is ongoing that you need to be very involved. But I submit to you that there are probably other circumstances whereby you can allow for greater discussion and greater input with the person who's now tasked with developing this project. And so the question then becomes, after you ask what's on your mind, I'm concerned about what kind of outcomes we might be considering when we're talking about this mentoring program. What we call the awe question that follows is, and what else? And in that moment, you are pausing and not jumping in to say, well, the three outcomes that I think are most important are ensuring that the mentor grows in their capacity to handle interactions with different individuals from different types of different generations, that the mentee grows in their technical knowledge, and that the time doesn't exceed what we've committed to in the plan, whatever it is, right? Rather than you sitting back and say, okay, these are the three outcomes that I expect, you ask probing questions to try to see if the individual can participate in the conversation and think critically about what the challenges that prompted them to come to you in the first place. And so the idea is you are telling less and asking more. When you ask, and what else? What else is on your mind? The person could respond, well, I'm not sure that I'm equipped to understand what would be the good outcomes. And so you could ask additional probing questions. Well, where could you gain access to this information? What do you think would be appropriate outcomes for a mentoring relationship? And continue to probe, and if you need to initially, you can certainly ask leading questions. But the idea is that you are trying to encourage critical thinking and kind of problem solving that occurs individually. And in doing so, you help the person become better equipped to handle these challenges or other types of challenges on their own. Sometimes you might find that your advice is not always as good as you wanted it to be, right? One of my favorite ways to kind of deflect this, coming to you to make a decision kind of question, particularly if there's a group of people, I often say, and what would you do? And I push the question to someone else, and what would you do? And what would you do? And I solicit input from many individuals in the meeting, because when you are designated as the boss, when you are the director, when you are the supervisor, when you are the person with the most technical expertise, the highest title, or the person who has the greatest amount of information in a particular area, you are often, as we learned in our very first session several weeks ago, the bias is to defer to your opinion, which may be a very good opinion, but there may be other opinions that are worthy and valuable as well. And critically, I think it's important to keep in mind that we're trying to build the capacity of others within the organization to take greater responsibility for their challenges in their work. The next question is kind of a focus question, and these questions are set up as a series as prompts for you to consider or to encourage this kind of dialogue. So the focus questions are, what's the real challenge for you here? Or, what are you concerned about, as it were, related to the mentoring program? You're trying to understand the real problem. And what I think is important noted here on the second bullet, not the first problem. So the first problem may be that the individual came to you because they were unclear on the outcomes that they should establish for the mentoring program. But the real problem may be the person doesn't feel empowered to make the kinds of decisions, and perhaps you want to affirm that they are empowered to make these kinds of calls. Maybe the real problem is that the person does not have knowledge or expertise in mentoring. And so how can you increase that capacity in mentoring? And so if you stick with the questions that start with what, and try to probe onto the real problem, that can also be a really powerful learning opportunity for the person that is coming to you with questions. The next question, I think, is something that is really important too. It's called the foundation question. The question is simply, what do you want? Or what do you want out of this? And so it prompts the questioner to really think about what is necessary in the interaction. I know, this is an aspect of my own kind of self-awareness, that I am not very comfortable with silence. And so you may notice when I'm, interacting with you in these training sessions, or when I do training in the classroom, if I, ask a question or pose a question to a class or in some kind of interactive workshop, it is very difficult for me to just wait for the response. But that is when some of the best discussion happens, I think. And so I have had to personally learn tools, things in terms of sitting on my hands or holding a pen in front of the classroom and kind of like twiddling it, which I know can be annoying for my students, but whatever it is, to get comfortable with silence and make sure that the response comes from the individual that you're coaching and not from you. And that is going to be critical throughout all of these questions. Again, talk less, listen more. Get comfortable with silence and comfortable with asking questions to help the individual gain greater capacity for their needs. You move on to then, how can I help? Or out of curiosity, how can I help? Or something to the effect of, to make sure that I'm clear, how can I help you, right? And so it's not, I'm going to provide you with an answer, but it could be just that I am wanting to gain greater clarity around how I can assist with this problem and avoid jumping into the, okay, well, here's the solution, right? And so this morning with the alarm going off at my house, my husband could have said, fine, I'll take your phone, I'll download the app, I'll give you the code that I know you know all of the time, but he wasn't going to do that. He didn't rescue me from the situation. He's going to force me into being an active participant and engaged in the problem that we need to solve at our house, or the new technology that we've implemented at our house. So avoiding rescuer mode, but really encouraging the conversation to encouraging the questioner to clearly articulate how you can help is important at this stage of the conversation. The next question that we move to is the strategic question, right? And so here is where we are trying to gain a greater understanding of either the projects, the people, or what we call the patterns related to the challenges that the person is confronting. And so these are things like, are there processes that we need to improve? Are there expectations that we need to manage? Are there habits that we need to break? So if we were to develop a mentoring program, going back to the example that we're kind of carrying through this example, if we ask someone in our organization to take on the development of a mentoring program, that could be a sizable lift in terms of the time necessary to do that. So what other projects could we maybe move off of this person's plate, or could we postpone for some amount of time so that the person has greater capacity to do that? That can be a place for you to actively engage, particularly if you are someone who is the kind of the manager or the supervisor of the individual, to ensure that you are providing appropriate time for the types of projects that are most important. You may be well positioned to provide networking. So access to other individuals, access to experts, connections to other types of relationships. And so the Dean of the College of Business here at JMU is exceptional at forging relationships between two people who do not necessarily know each other. So I recently had the need for someone to serve in a very specific role on my advisory board, and I shared this with the dean. The dean, through email, created a virtual introduction from me to the individual that he thought would be a good fit. I then followed up with the email, scheduled the Zoom call. That is a role that I was appreciative that he played, and that you as a manager or supervisor could play, just in terms of making a connection without actually jumping in and being the person to solve the problem. And then two, what other capacity in terms of habits or patterns, do you have something in place that has served the organization, but perhaps does not serve the organization as you want it to be going forward? And so this may be an opportunity for you to question existing patterns, question existing processes, and whether they are really the most effective for taking your team to the next phase of kind of where your goals are. And then finally, the last question in this is an opportunity for the individual who is asking the question to reflect on what happened in the conversation. And so these 7 questions that are kind of, a series of question prompts to kind of solve, it's a way for you to encourage individuals to solve their own problems. This last part really draws on the research related to reflection and how important reflection is to solidifying knowledge acquisition. And so I think it's fantastic to end these kinds of conversations with, what was most useful for you here? What did you find valuable about this chat? And it could be that they simply had the time and space to articulate the challenge with someone who was a good sounding board. It could be for you to reframe the issue in a way that identified the real problem and not the first problem, and to provide encouragement that, through this conversation, we were able to get to the real problem, and that was a great learning on your part. Could be for you to reinforce some aspects of the conversation to really make it stick, right? So that they're able to retrieve that in the future if necessary. But I love that you take the time in this particular coaching strategy to really try to make the learning stick at the end of the conversation. So those are kind of again, a series of questions to try to encourage greater capacity. What are your reactions to those, or whether you think that those could be important or helpful in some of your interactions? perhaps maybe in the interest of time, we can go forward with the next type of coaching, which is a slightly different lens, a slightly different approach, and then we could maybe compare and contrast the two at the end. So why don't we quickly move into that? So I'm going to actually skip through that, and so that we can talk through Marsha Reynolds' approach. So Marsha Reynolds is known for her approach to coaching, which is called reflective inquiry. This is, if you think about the last question from Michael Bungay Steinier's approach, it really kind of launches from there to consider that we don't necessarily learn from experience, we learn from the reflection on the experience. And to the extent that we reflect more on our experiences, we have greater learning from what we went through. And so she describes that coaching can provide value when each of these goals are met. So when you actually define an outcome for the coaching session. And so this, in these situations, you would say, let's talk about let's have this conversation in terms of a coaching conversation, right? And the outcome that we both identify is X, whatever you want it to be, right? Blocks or what needs to be resolved are discovered. And so some of those challenges that we've articulated, and then an achievable next step is articulated. And I really appreciate this part of the coaching example because it focuses us on setting the stage for future action that is owned by the person who is asking the question. And so in the reflective inquiry approach to coaching, there are 5 essential practices. So focus, active replay, what she calls brain hacking, goaltending, and then new and next. So let me just kind of quickly go through these so that we can talk about the 2 different approaches at the end. So focus is about setting expectations, maintaining your belief in the person's capabilities, and knowing the right time to shift from clarifying the problem to coaching the person in front of you. This takes practice, right? So any of you who are involved in coaching know that this can be a real challenge, from probing questions to try to get the person with whom you're interacting to share what really the problem is, to then shifting to saying, okay, I need to be a little bit more directive here because the person is struggling. One thing that can be helpful, though, as you're going through that process is to be an active replayer of the conversation, using things like recapping. So you're telling me or paraphrasing the words, right? Naming the experience. So your challenge is related to program development, or your challenge is related to like outcomes for a program that you think would be valuable to our organization. What is it, right? Summarizing. Active replaying of a conversation requires you to be very involved and engaged, so that you're looking for any kind of emotional or physical shifts in the person. So if they sit back, if they cross their arms, trying to do this on screen, right? If you notice any changes in levels of frustration because you're not providing the kind of guidance, being engaged in a way where you are trying to support the learning is part of your role as a coach in the active replay part of the conversation. The next part of a coaching conversation would then be to coach the story. I think it's really important to remember here that the way we tell a story or the way we describe a challenge really becomes our narrative about what happened, right? So when I was thinking about my alarm situation this morning, I'm intentionally trying to not be frustrated with my partner that he doesn't want to just handle this on his own. And I'm trying to create the narrative in my head that this is a learning opportunity for me, right? And so when you're coaching the story, you are helping to frame the narrative in a way that is developmental for those with whom you're interacting, right? So you may have a challenge related to training the new person that you've just hired. And so maybe someone comes into your office and says, we've hired this new person, they're not performing up to expectations. I'm really having trouble training them. They do not seem to understand the technology that's required to be effective in this role. They just can't get it, right? And so helping coach the story helps frame the issue in a way that can be more constructive. So is it that the new person can't get it? Or is it that we have not provided enough training? We've not provided the tools. We haven't provided opportunities to perform in a way that cements the learning and knowledge. And so this is a way for you to try to bring an individual's bias or an individual's assumptions to light in a way that challenges them to really kind of think through what the issue really is. You move into then what we call goaltending here, and these are creating bookends for the conversation, so the beginning and the end, getting someone to really crystallize their thoughts in a way that is clear, and tracking progress. And then, as I talked about, one of the aspects that I really like about this approach to coaching is kind of the new and next. So getting buy-in and a commitment to define how the person will take next steps. So if we talk back to kind of the mentoring conversation, it's, are you able to go forward with developing the mentoring program in a way that considers outcomes that are important to all of those involved? And when will that happen, right? If we think about the research on motivation, right, the SMART goals that are necessary to all of these kinds of commitments. So is the action specific? Is it measurable? Is it actionable? Is it realistic? And is it time sensitive? Does it contain all of those aspects that will ensure that the person has a greater likelihood of being able to continue with movement on that particular issue? So this approach to coaching is more about having the reflective and kind of the active reflection, encouraging people to be aware of their own biases or to be aware of their own narrative about the challenge, and then to also ensure that you receive a buy-in and commitment for action going forward. The reason that I introduced two different approaches to coaching, and again, you are probably familiar with many more, and there are many, many others that are available out there, is that I think to be an effective coach, you need to find a coaching method that is authentic to you. And so some of you may have been listening to the approach prescribed, the first approach, the coaching habit, and said, I don't see myself being very comfortable asking those series of questions. That does not seem authentic to me, nor is it something that I think that I could pull off in a way without jumping into survivor mode. Perhaps this approach, the coach the person, not the problem approach, is something that is more authentic to you. If it's not, I do encourage you to try to find something that will be helpful to you in coaching those around you. And what I think we can, probably all agree, coaching is it is a way in which we can really tremendously build capacity within our organizations. But it is a specific set of skills that can be cultivated or developed. And as the person who is doing the coaching, it does require a lot of effort to kind of be present, to maybe break some habits that we've had of jumping in and solving problems, so that we ensure that others are better equipped to do that as well. I know we are short on time, but I wanted to end with this question for the group, and whether we have time now or whether we want to do this, or whether you want to do this after our session. I would encourage you to think about how greater mentoring and coaching could increase the capacity at Yali. I actually, if you believe that this is an important aspect of your job or others around you, I often encourage you to build this into the performance evaluations of those within your organization. So whether those are directors, leaders, whatever your role is, to include this as an item on the job description that you're responsible for mentoring, someone outside of your group, or you are responsible for coaching others in your team. That is literally part of your task, because we know the benefits that accrue to organizations. So do you have, just as we've presented a lot of information, do you have any ideas kind of top of mind about how greater mentoring or coaching can increase capacity, or how you might go forward? And I invite you to either raise your hand or just come off mute as you are able. George.
Thank you. I think how mentoring and coaching can increase the capacity of Yali is just getting the best out of the team members that we have. Yeah, because by mentoring and coaching, we basically improve the capacities to deliver the functions that each individual is working on. And a mentor can actually see the capabilities of an individual team member and help the individual navigate around the rough edges. Yeah, so that's actually my answer to your question. Thank you, Elizabeth.
Thank you, George. I think those are great examples, and I love how you talk about really helping individuals achieve their potential. That's an important outcome. Betty, please.
I think from my previous experience with a different employer, it was very effective having a match between the senior members of staff, senior in terms of experience, because it meant that, just like George is saying, the efficiencies of the teams are improved. I think it's less frustration because your expectations are met better when you have mentored the person. It also means that, yes, you have a stronger team, but on the practical level, it was done such that all the managers had someone to coach, and that becomes part of their tasks, or rather JD. And so it's not separated. It's not about friendship. It's about a tangible part of their performance. Thank you.
Thank you, Betty. I love how you included that as a tangible part of their performance, because I agree that is one of the easiest and best ways to build the coaching habits into our organization, or the mentoring habits, is to simply make it an expectation of individuals or leaders within our companies. So I hope then that you found this information and our time this morning valuable. It is a sincere pleasure to spend this time with you. I just enjoy hearing your expertise and your experiences. I'll be with you later in the week, and I think it is time then that we call it a night. Amy or Charlie, do you have anything you'd like to add at the end to kind of wrap us up?
Well, thank you for so much for being with us today. We have
My pleasure.
really
Thank you all. I appreciate your time.
appreciated your insights and look forward to seeing you later in the week.
Great.
I just wanted to also remind everyone that we will be sending out evaluations for our sessions today, so please fill those out. And tomorrow we'll get started at the same time, and we will be learning about building trust in teams and partnerships and building an effective organizational culture. So those will be our workshops tomorrow, and you will get another reminder with a Zoom invite this evening. So we'll be ready to get going tomorrow. So thank you so much, everyone, and have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thank you so much. Take
Thank
care.
you and bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you so much. I appreciate.
Yes, thank you. Take care.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye, Emmy.